So good afternoon, everyone. We're going to just wait just another minute or two for others to just jump on. But I do want to welcome you to Nursing Careers in the Life Science. So glad that you could join today. I know people are very, very busy, but my goal is to make this a very informative session for all of you. And importantly, I have some information to share, but I do want to take all of the questions that you may have. So we will just start at 1 minute after our allotted time, and we'll be ready to dive in. Okay, well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I think we will get started. So my name is Janice Nissen, and if you can go back, please. I am a nurse like all of you, and have spent the majority of my career actually working in life science companies, Abbott Laboratories, and also Merck. But started out as a nurse like all of you. And one of the things I realized working at both of the companies was that I began to run into nurses working in so many different roles in the two life science companies that I worked at. And in fact, when I was at Merck, we started a network of the nurses because we had so many nurses working across the company. And one of the things that we all agreed on was that we loved the jobs that we were doing. There were so many different things that nurses could do, but we never learned about this when we went through our training. And it didn't matter what your training was whether it was bachelor degree, master degree, or a doctorate in nursing. We never learned about this industry, but it is an industry that is very integral to healthcare. And so what I hope to do today is share with you a little bit about the opportunities that are available to you. And for those that are interested, we have actually a free guide that we're ready to give to you that describes some of these roles in a little bit more detail. But again, this is a session for you, and I want to make it as productive as possible. And so I want to make sure we get to your questions. So we'll go to the next slide. The next slide is one you're very familiar with, which is what's the current state of nursing today? Well, first of all, nurses are the largest segment of the U.S. healthcare workforce. So, almost 5 million nationally. So certainly there's a lot of power in knowing you're the largest segment. You are consistently the most trusted healthcare professional through the Gallup poll that happens every year, more so than pharmacists, more so than physicians and other healthcare providers. But we do know that there is a lot of turnover that's happening right now with nurses. It really accelerated with the pandemic. In fact, a McKinsey study shows that about 45% of inpatient nurses are looking to leave. And you know these top turnover reasons, right? Not feeling valued, workload, nurse to staff, nurse to patient ratios that are very high. And maybe a lack of career advancement. And CNN actually recently reported 1,000 nurses are completely looking to completely leave the profession, or have left the profession in the last 2 years. So I really don't want people to leave the profession. When I retired from Merck, I said that I wanted to really invest my time in helping nurses understand there are career options and not to leave the profession. But there's a real opportunity to really educate nurses because, again, we don't learn about this in school. And so that's really what I'm hoping to do today. The next slide, please. And I really feel strongly that this is not to create competition for nurses necessarily, but instead, if we expand the career options for nurses, we expand the number of people that actually go into this field to begin with and consider a career in nursing. So the next slide will talk to you a little bit about what is the life science industry. It may not be a term you're even familiar with. It's a growing industry, and it's defined by the following: biopharmaceutical companies, diagnostic companies, medical device, and then a whole host of companies that provide services and resources to these companies. Globally, it's $133 billion. market is growing just under 10%. Over 500,000, almost 500,000 people are employed in this industry in the US alone. And like science that continues to evolve, this industry will continue to evolve. And there's many opportunities for nurses, which I'll show you in a moment. And I really feel strongly that it is an industry that is very aligned with nurses' passions. Nurses are very focused on patients. This industry is focused on the patient. And they're really focused on transforming healthcare, which is what nurses look to do as well. So the next slide, please. So the opportunity is, again, the industry's focus on the patient. Nurses understand patients. They understand them better than any other healthcare professional. They understand patients and their family. They understand health literacy. They understand the importance of cultural sensitivity and awareness. You have medical and clinical knowledge that's extremely valuable to life science. Working at a life science company is financially rewarding with a good benefit package, with career progression. And it's even an opportunity for nurses maybe later in their career, or even those that we are finding working at the bedside really difficult and very physically limiting. I feel it's an opportunity that offers nurses greater respect and work flexibility. There's opportunities for remote work or hybrid work. And it really capitalizes on what nurses do well. They're critical thinkers, as you all know. We're innovators. We are very agile. And these are all skills valuable to life science companies. So the next slide, please. So the program that I developed with 4 other nurses who work at life science companies in collaboration with the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, ACMA, it's really the first of its kind program. After I retired and decided I wanted to start this program, I looked and did a landscape assessment and did not find a program like this. So I knew we needed to develop it because nurses need to understand how these industries operate, how they're regulated, and then importantly, what roles are available. So the Certified Nurse Medical Affairs Professional Program is that pathway for nurses to understand the industry so that when you apply, you really can demonstrate that you understand how the industry operates. Frankly, I wish I had this course before I entered the industry because I spent a lot of years trying to understand at a more holistic level how the industry operates. This program it will take about 20 hours to complete. It's a credentialed program, and it offers up to 15 hours of nursing CEUs through an ANCC approved provider, the Institute for Medical and Nursing Education. And it's completely online and using adult learning principles. So each module has learning objectives, or knowledge checks, and ways to apply what you are learning as you go through. Next slide, please. So the objectives are to help nurses understand drug, device, and diagnostic development, understand the regulations, because there are a significant amount of regulations in the industry, just like there are regulations for health systems. Importantly, it helps you understand what are the roles, what's a job description for one of the roles that nurses may assume? What are some of the skills required and skills developed? And then importantly, it goes through some of the practical and more emotional considerations when you think about making this change, because it is a big change to move from direct patient care, but to move to a role that actually has an indirect impact on thousands and millions of patients. So the next slide will show you the actual modules that are contained in the program. So it starts with the introduction about making this career pivot, and then it goes into, in detail, how a biopharmaceutical industry operates, drug and device. What is the drug development process? How are clinical trials designed? What are the different phases? What about compliance and regulations that govern the industry? And things that are so important in today's environment, like health economics and outcomes research. medical information. What are all the ways that a company in life science has to provide medical information to both consumers and to HCPs? Safety and pharmacovigilance. When I started in the industry, I didn't even know what pharmacovigilance was, but it's so, so important. And we describe that in detail and the importance of that, which is essentially patient safety. And then some of the core competencies that you will develop in working in this industry. Presentation and communication skills, which you can really benefit from in any role that you have. And then a whole module about the different roles, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And then obviously the navigation from the bedside to the life sciences. So the next section that we're going to go through is, what are the typical roles for nurses in life science? So I list them all here, but what we're going to do next is we're going to do a brief description and a brief look at each of these roles. So let's move forward. And medical affairs is an area in life science company because these products are for human health, that you need medical affairs capabilities. And there's a number of roles that nurses can assume in medical affairs. So the first one is medical writing. And medical writing is a role that helps to develop a lot of documents that require both clinical and medical knowledge that nurses have. They can be clinical trial protocols, investigator brochures, summaries of congresses and scientific meetings. And this is a role that will work on a lot of different presentations. They can be very highly scientific, but they can also be those that are designed for the consumer or the lay public. And so you can see some of the skills that you might want to build and have in this particular role, but certainly a very good role for nurses. The next role is medical information, because these companies have to, on a regular basis, are required and approached to ask and answer medical questions. And they can be from either healthcare providers or from patients and consumers. And they can come in through the regular mail, through email, through websites, or through a call center. And it's really important that the information provided is accurate and it adheres to the label for that particular product. And so you can see that nurses do really well at these in this kind of role, because they are very good communicators, they're very good listeners, and they have a good sense of health literacy and the importance, especially when you're talking to a consumer. So the next slide goes through a medical science liaison, or an MSL. And this is a role that interfaces with scientific and key opinion leaders, and usually specializes in a certain therapeutic area. So it's quite common to have medical science liaisons in cardiovascular area, or neurology, oncology, respiratory, autoimmune. And the MSL role is one that would appeal to people who like to read scientific papers and like to stay up to date on the latest science, and be able to then discuss that latest science with these key opinion leaders. And this is a role that usually is a remote role, where you have a certain territory that you would cover of certain scientific leaders. But nurses are great at this role because they're very used to speaking with physicians and scientific leaders. So the next slide in medical affairs, in research and development, is there are a number of roles that we can look at here. And so research and development is, a critical part of a life science company, because obviously that is the core of what they do. Is they find new molecules and biologics and develop them for unmet needs. So the first role we'll talk about in research and development is a clinical trial research associate or manager. And so all products, whether they be medical device or biopharmaceuticals for diagnostics go through a series of clinical trials to demonstrate their safety and efficacy. This is the only way that they get approved in any country, whether it's the US or any other country. And so these clinical trials are done at clinical trial sites. And nurses can work with these sites to ensure that the clinical trials are proceeding on time, on budget, that they are recruiting the appropriate patients, the appropriate diversity of patients for the clinical trials, and that help problem solve if there are issues that the clinical trial sites may be encountering. Because the faster that these clinical trials are done effectively and safely for the patients, the faster that these new innovations are able to come forward. So that's another role. So we'll go to the next role, which is a related role, but a little different. And this is a clinical trial site management. And in this role, they use data and previous relationships with clinical investigators to then develop a plan of where these particular clinical trials should take place, and make sure that all of the appropriate documentation is there, that from both starting the trial to actually closing out the trial, and ensuring that all along the way that that the trial has been completed appropriately. So the next slide role in the research and development area is pharmacovigilance. So again, I mentioned that when I first started in the industry, I didn't know what this was, but pharmacovigilance is really the ability for companies to monitor the effects of their medical drugs or devices on patients, and if there are any side effects that are emerging. And this role works both in products that are going through clinical trials and development, but also continuing to look at reports of any side effects that may come up for products that are already approved and in the market. So it's an extremely important role. And this is a requirement for companies to keep following patients that are on these drugs to make sure that if there are changes that have to happen to the labeling, that they would that would be taken care of. So again, pharmacovigilance is very important to protect patient safety. And you can see some of the skills that are really important in this particular role. So we'll go to the next, which is regulatory affairs. So regulatory affairs works with the regulators. So in the US, that's the Food and Drug Administration. And they work to ensure that we have the appropriate data and submission guidelines to seek the approval. And sometimes if a product is not approved, there are a number of steps that need to be taken to maybe additional studies, additional data that's required. And this role is critical in ensuring that that data is collected and that it is all the marketing materials also adhere to any labeling that has been approved. So this is a role that deals directly with those regulators, as I mentioned, like the FDA. So we'll go to the next role, which is outcomes research. And this is so important because many insurers are looking for what is the value of this particular product, not just on a patient, but on a broader society or a health system at large. And this role works to help design and follow through on studies that demonstrate what this product's value is. It may be a study comparing a product to the current standard of care or an existing product. And this is really important for access and reimbursement and making sure that patients eventually do receive these innovations. So we'll move on to roles that are in the more commercial space. And these roles include a sales and account management is the next role. And, in a life science company, once there's an approved product, there's an opportunity then to raise awareness and ensure that there is education among the physicians that could prescribe this product on behalf of their patients. And so this is a role that typically calls on HCPs in a certain therapeutic area, or organized group practices, or health systems, or even an insurer. And in account management might be working with a set of insurers or a health system. And this is usually a field-based role, and one where you are managing a territory and working with a set of HCPs or health systems. And much like owning your own business, essentially. And the company provides you with all the resources and training that you need to manage that business on behalf of the company. And then the next slide goes through another role in commercial, which is marketing. And marketing is a role that is balances a lot of priorities, because it works with a lot of different stakeholder groups within the company, both R&D and medical affairs and market research. And this role really develops the strategy for the product to ensure that the product is viable and available to the patients that need it, but is also financially viable to the company. So it involves a lot of work around targeting the right customers and pricing and developing the right access strategy and educational resources as well. And so nurses do really well in this role because they understand the science and they understand the environment in which these products are utilized. So we'll move on to another set of roles, nurse educator. This is one that's pretty self-explanatory, probably to all of you on the phone. You may have worked with this role. You may actually be doing this role within your current health system that you may be working. But it's obviously an educational role for both patients and HCPs. Life science companies use this role because many times their products need to have special training around administration or management of side effects. And nurse educators can do this role very, very well. They're used to working with patients. They're used to communicating to patients in an understandable way. So we'll move on to the next set of roles. These roles might sit in a company in a more corporate environment. And so there's a couple here that I have seen nurses really excel at. So we'll go to the next one, which is employee health and wellness. And this is essentially something you're familiar with. It's like occupational health. But as you can imagine, many life science companies are quite large and have a lot of employees. And so they need nurses that can do occupational health and do pre-employment screenings, that can do return to work assessments, especially important for essential personnel like those that are on a manufacturing line or that work in the research labs. And you can imagine how important this role was in COVID, because obviously many of these companies were doing work from home and needed a lot of instruction about how to keep themselves safe and how to keep their families safe as well. This role also works a lot with understanding employee data in terms of the health of the workforce and how to help to keep the employee workforce very healthy. So doing health fairs and helping employees understand the best ways to, maintain their health. And then the next role is patient engagement. And this is actually a role that I did at Merck. And it was a small team that we had that actually worked across the entire company to bring the patient perspective into it. So whether it was bringing patients in to look at how clinical trials were designed, how the endpoints were developed with patients in mind, how we improved diversity in clinical trials, to how we packaged the products and ensured that the packaging was intuitive, that there were resources and support for patients, especially through patient advocacy groups. And so it was a very important role, particularly as companies have realized that physicians who act on behalf of patients in terms of prescribing and recommending treatment, they don't always know what patients want or value. And so it's really important to talk to those ultimate recipients of the innovations that these companies bring. So the next role is in health equity. And you're very familiar with health equity, and you're very familiar with all of the efforts that many are undertaking to eliminate or decrease the number of disparities that we have in healthcare today. We are all familiar with that, and it's been a longstanding issue that we all have to do better at. And life science companies are the same. They really do want to make sure that all of the populations that can benefit from their product or services are getting access to it. So, you know, whether it's in the form of patient assistance, whether it's in the form of helping to improve diversity in clinical trials, to helping to ensure that they're doing what they can to help develop more investigators that are working with these different underserved populations. Those are all things that this role gets involved in, as well as continuing to train internally about the importance of health equity. So that is another role that is available. And then, you know, before we sort of conclude and begin to open it up for your questions, so please begin thinking about your questions. It's really important, and in this educational program, that we thought about making this transition. It is emotional because nurses went into nursing because they wanted to help patients. So most of the nurses I worked with have continued to keep their license up, and that enabled them to maybe do a volunteer effort. A lot of nurses volunteered during the pandemic. I did as well. But also maybe doing an occasional shift at an ER or at a local hospital. But it is important to realize that we are moving from direct patient care, but the indirect impact on patients is really significant and really one that gives you a lot of sense of purpose. Another consideration is that there are different tools and a different work environment. You're going to be working on more of the Microsoft suite of services of Word and PowerPoint and Excel. You may be working in a remote role or a hybrid role. You're going to maybe doing a lot of Zoom meetings. That's different than when you're working at the bedside. And it's, you know, need to understand sort of online etiquette. There may be a role that you have to travel. And so that may be something you need to consider. But lastly, I want you to all know that there is support at life science companies. When I was at Merck, we had a nurse network. So we had a large number of nurses that could provide help to new nurses that were coming on board, but also could help with educating on other career opportunities for nurses within the company. Because as I mentioned, these set of roles that I just went through are pretty diverse. And it's important that nurses would know there are many things that you could do within the company. And many other life science companies have these kinds of nurse networks as well. So we'll move on. I wanted to share with you a couple of testimonials from nurses that have started the program or completed the program. This program really just launched in the summer, so we're still pretty new in terms of raising awareness around it. But this is Angela Francis, and you know, she talks about the fact that she liked the multimodal learning that kept her engaged, and that she felt well prepared to take the final exam. I think this is a really important point she brings up. That prior to the course, I had heard of the word biopharma, but knew nurses could work in clinical research, but was completely unaware of the many opportunities that are available. So she has been applying for the different roles and feels pretty qualified in doing so. The next testimonial is from another individual, Scott, who took the program. And, you know, he just speaks to the importance of having this background once you decide to make that transition from bedside to more of the corporate world, and understanding all of the different departments that are there. You know, he says, knowledge is power, and the program provides the knowledge that will help you best communicate with hiring managers and stakeholders and more. So he felt that provided some good skills for him. So we'll move on from there. I just want to give you one fact here about the partner that I developed in developing this CNAP program, which is the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs. The reason I worked with them is that they have developed a lot of educational programs for life science companies. So as you can see, they work with over 200 biopharmaceutical companies already. They have really good outcomes based on the programs that they have, with 80%, improvement in knowledge of those that have gone through their programs, and lots of individuals, over 25,000 plus, that have already gone through their courses, and it is the accredited body. So I felt really good about that partnership with ACMA. And then let's go to the next slide, which really, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for your questions. This may seem daunting to you to think about moving and making a big career change, and it is a big step. And I just wanted to point out that I think it's really, there's many ways to go through this career pivot. And there's really many steps to take. What I'm describing to you is really the first step, which is kind of educating you on the industry and pointing in the direction of how you can get educated on the industry. In addition to this program, you should be looking for people on LinkedIn that already work at these companies, that are in these roles, and talking to them. So doing some networking. And then finding out, and again, the program helps you with that, to determine which roles that I described really speak to you, to the things that you get excited about and that are interesting to you. And then begin looking at those job descriptions. Understand that when you apply for these roles, you want to put in your resume some of the keywords that are in the job description. A lot of these companies use these applicant tracking systems, or ATS. And so, your resume is likely to get through if you're pulling in your resume some of those, keywords that they are looking for. And they're basically competencies, so, things like collaboration, things like critical thinking. And then post for those roles, and then obviously prepare to interview for those roles. But, it may seem daunting, but if you think about breaking it down into these little steps, I think that you will be, very successful. And I just want to conclude by saying that I'm very happy to help. I probably talk on a weekly basis with 3 or 4 people who reach out to me on LinkedIn. This is my passion, and I want to help nurses that feel like this is the right move for them be successful and secure the role, because I know you can offer a lot to life science companies and also be happy in your career. So let's open it up to the questions that maybe have come in, and be happy to see if I can help. Yes, so Catherine, thank you for your question. I'd love to hear about commercial learning and development roles in pharma biotech. That is a role I am in now as a first timer in the industry. Oh, that's terrific. Catherine, I probably should include that as one of the roles that nurses can excel in, because obviously there are so many individuals within a life science company that have to continue to, keep their skills up, have to keep learning and getting certified in their particular field. And science continues to advance. And so really working at a life science company, you're continuing to learn. So I would imagine that you are finding that to be very an interesting role, and a role that is very valuable in leveraging your nursing background, because you do understand the clinical aspects, you understand medical and science. So I don't know, Catherine, if you want to add anything to that, but thank you for bringing that up. I probably should include that role in the presentation. Thank you. The question I had was, is this something an associate degree can pursue? I would say that it generally, and I know we're trying to kind of get away from everything being very degree focused and focus much more on what the competencies are. But in my experience, generally the roles that I am highlighting here tend to be individuals that do have a bachelor degree as a minimum. Um, so I think that what I might encourage is to maybe consider getting that bachelor degree and then pursuing one of these opportunities. Thank you, Charlotte, for the question. How can the CNAP compare with the newest certification that just came out? Oh, I think it's called the Certified Specialty Pharma Professional. Is there overlap in content? Yes, so there would be some overlap, but the Certified Specialty Pharma Professional role is one that is much more focused on the commercial roles, so a sales representative or an account manager, and it would be much more focused on regulations dictating and regulating how you interact with physicians, because that is the primary role, is to educate physicians about a given product. It would not go into the different roles that nurses could assume, and it would not go into the details around how clinical trials operate, um, pharmacovigilance, medical affairs in the depth that the CNAP program does. So I would say that the overlap would be relatively small. And if you are absolutely convinced that you would like to be a specialty pharma representative, you probably should do that program. But if you are still thinking that you're not sure and you want to explore all the roles that might be available to a nurse, then I would recommend the CNAP program. Thank you, Catherine. Jennifer, would this help me in different industries besides pharma and bio? It definitely would help you in other companies that support pharma and bio, but it is fairly specific to how a life science company operates. So yes, pharma and biotech part of that, but also medical device and diagnostics as well. So I think it's actually a little bit broader than just pharma and bio. It's really all of life science. Thanks for the question, Jennifer. Leslie, I currently work in pharmacovigilance for a large clinical research organization, a CRO. Do you have any suggestions for ongoing education certification to stay marketable, relevant, given the current landscape in pharma, mergers and layoffs? And that is true, Leslie. I would say right now there is, a lot of acquisitions that are happening, companies buying others. There are layoffs that are happening, but then there are also a host of companies with newer products coming that are also hiring. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I absolutely acknowledge that. But ongoing certification and education, what I might suggest, and maybe Leslie, you already belong to one of the LinkedIn communities that are for those in life science companies or pharmaceutical companies, and maybe looking at other certifications that they are talking about in those LinkedIn communities. Because I know, for example, there's a community that I belong to in LinkedIn that's for clinical research professionals, and there are a number of certifications that they are offering or are talked about. So that might be one suggestion that I would have for you of those that you could look into. Thanks for the question. Elena. Oh, thank you. Great presentation. And Elena, you and I have talked before, so it's great to reconnect with you. Would love to join the network of nurses to help upskill skills for myself and other nurse colleagues that apply for jobs with Vesna medical staffing. Question: how would you classify the nurse role providing remote patient monitoring? It includes patient engagement, account management, nurse educator, and some other roles in research and development and trials. Oh, absolutely. Yes, Elena, thank you. Thank you for that. The remote patient monitoring, I think, is a really fascinating and exciting new trend that we're seeing more and more. Large health systems that are investing in, quote, the hospital at home, which requires patients to have remote patient monitoring and requires nurses to visit them and check on them. And so if there are pieces, of our program that would be helpful to people that you're hiring, Elena, we, certainly would love to talk to you and, develop a partnership on how we could, help assist that. But I do think remote patient monitoring would benefit from some of the education that we put in this program. And I think you're going to be very busy in the future because I think that's a trend that's really going to continue to take off. Thank you. Sean, hello. I'm a new licensed RN. Do I need to have hospital experience prior to taking CNAP? No, Sean, you do not. And so, I think, first of all, you will get nursing credit for taking the program. Don't have to have prior hospital experience. So I think that, it would really benefit you if you're thinking about making a career change to learn about the industry and then decide if that's something that you want to do, moving forward. Yep. Thanks for the question, Sean. Jennifer, what can be a role within medical affairs? Yeah, Jennifer, so there are many roles in medical affairs. So, and again, when you receive the booklet that we can send you that goes through each of these roles, you'll see that there's a number of them. So typically in medical affairs is the medical writing that I described, the medical science liaison, the medical information specialist role, and even medical education is a role that many nurses have been in. And so meaning that life science companies provide they provide and funds certified medical education for physicians. And part of the medical education role, which we didn't describe in detail here, but is important, does look for what are the unmet needs by talking to scientific leaders and understanding where more education is required, and then working with third parties to develop that program and get it credentialed and roll it out to the medical community. So again, with nurses' medical and clinical knowledge, they really do quite well in medical affairs. Jennifer. So I don't know if there's any other questions. No, but I will if you found today's webinar helpful and you want to learn more by talking with another nurse who worked at 3 different life science companies. You can join us on January 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're calling this Nursing Beyond the Bedside, Unveiling Opportunities in Life Sciences. So today I tried to give you the background about life science. What is life science companies? What are the roles that maybe nurses can assume? And on this webinar, what we'll do is we'll take a deeper dive by talking to Lisa and understanding what she has done. She has had a role as a medical science liaison and now currently working in patient insights. And so she can share how did she make that transition, what helped her make the transition, what does she see as sort of the pros and cons of working in the industry. And so I think you'll find it really, really helpful. So we can send you, for those that have come on today, we'll send you the link for that webinar, and that's January 18th at 1 p.m. And then finally, one of the things that we will send you as well is a free guide that we've put together that goes through nursing careers in life sciences. So it goes through some of the roles that I very briefly described today in a little bit more detail, and maybe will help you understand if this is the right career option for you. So thank you so much for attending. Here is my email address, and you can also find me on LinkedIn as well. And very happy to help other nurses in any way that I can. And I want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing every day, taking care of patients. And I do hope that this was helpful to you today. Thank you so much. Have a good day.